Good afternoon. This is PAG 5, also known as Amara. My name is Cheryl Mabika, and I'm from Zimbabwe.
Good evening. I'm Yale Benedict from Kenya.
Hello. Good evening. I'm Vedi from Mauritius.
Hello. This is Sujira Selj. I'm from Rwanda.
Hi, my name is Kazera. I'm from Rwanda. We are going to discuss bias and discrimination. Sherry, Serge, and myself, we are going to take you through the first section of the question, which is asking how do theory of behavioral economics suggest the irrational behavior produces implicit and explicit bias in human behavior?
Benedict and myself, Vedi, are going to discuss about the second component of the question, which is how can companies develop tactics, processes, and functionalities to overcome implicit bias that produces discrimination.
Yeah, the study done by Kemmerer and Ronstein in 2004 and another study done by Hellman in 2014 shows that behavioral economics investigates how people make judgment and decisions. It also considered a relatively young field of research, but increasingly visible among scholars. There are teams that were launched by governments. One was launched by UK government, which was a behavior insight team, also known as the nudge unit. And Obama administration also launched another team in 2014, which was social and behavioral science team. These teams were applied This team applied behavioral sciences, including behavioral economics, in governmental programs in order to increase people's quality life at lower costs. Now talking about implicit behavior, behavioral economics suggests that biases, implicit or explicit, disrupt rational resource allocation. Implicit bias are subconscious attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, action, and decision without us being aware of them. It can also influence hiring, promotion, and economic opportunities.
When there's a systematic error in thinking that when people are in a certain situation or a certain surrounding and environment, that influences their decision making and judgment. Another one is variance bias, which is a quick example could be the negative stereotype in a workplace where women are discriminated against by saying they cannot perform these intellectual or high skill demanding jobs, including executive roles. This has its own reason from historical factors that limited access to education and career choices for women way back in the past, but that has now influences us to wrongly conclude that women are less brilliant instead, while this has already happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago. It still comes back, and it's a really negative bias. Next, another example of this cognitive bias is people's choice based on social norms. Again, an environment you live in, the society you are in. If you are in a society that discriminates against Black people, you are more likely to also grow up in such. It's not automatic, but that particular environment you grew up in can influence your decision making and choices. So there is an article in the Washington Post by Gao where it says only 40% of uneducated people in many jobs said there's inequality.
The same scenes: protests, fury, anger, hurt spilling out across America and around the world. The cause, racism, police brutality. George Floyd was a 46-year-old father who was stopped by police in Minneapolis on the 25th of May, suspected of using fake money to pay for cigarettes. A white police officer was seen kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck as he was pinned to the ground. He repeatedly cried, "I can't breathe." He was held down for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. After 6 minutes, he stopped moving.
Just seen is an example of racial discrimination. It's an irrational economic behavior. It's an irrational social behavior, which also comes into economics. So this is an example of explicit bias. So explicit bias is conscious attitudes and beliefs that lead to clear discrimination. Examples of this include what we've just seen, George Floyd, the exclusion of Jews from the economy in Nazi Germany, and there's systemic racism against Black Americans, which block the best use of talent and reduces productivity, and it also causes economic losses. One of the behaviors is what we call framing. An example, I'll explain this using an example, which is of Stanford faculty, cooperative housing development. So they framed this housing development in 1950 to be a place where white people live. And there was a rule that said non-white participation was limited to 10% of the whole. So the reason why they did this was so that they could get mortgages easier from banks. If it was framed as a white people place where crime rate is low, people have stable incomes, this is the opposite of the perception when it's a Black community, because it's associated with high crime and banks would not want to invest their money in that community. So these stereotypes, they go beyond the employment arena to general social life. You've seen George Floyd. They go into companies and then they affect the production of the company because people are getting promoted because of their skin color instead of getting promoted because of their ability to do work. This graph shows us the distribution of people at different levels in the job market. So as you can see, the number of white men increases with the increase in the role in the job market. And the number of men of color, it's decreasing slightly. It remains constant. So they don't increase that much. They don't decrease that much. It's like a constant. You don't get promoted. You just stay where you are. And the number of white women, it decreases again, but at a rate that is better than that of the women of color. Women of color are the most disadvantaged. As we continue talking about explicit bias, I mentioned earlier that it results in the underutilization of talent in companies. And as we saw in that graph, we were looking at the positions in the company. Now we're talking about the wage gap. So the wage gap has become wider and it's widening faster among those with more education between the Blacks and the whites. So we will look at an example of the Freedman Bank in the United States. So its collapse due to mismanagement by the First National Bank had lasting negative impact. And the ongoing trust of financial institutions among African Americans, it can be traced back to such events. So long ago, people used to see it as a rational thing to go to college, get a degree, you get a better job, you get a better salary. But now it's no longer a rational decision because the wage gap is increasing and you don't necessarily get a better salary because you've gone to college if you are a person of color. So companies are now engaging in what we call anchoring, especially law firms and financial management companies. They know that out there, people want their portfolios to be managed by white people because they think they're better. So the final that we'll talk about as we conclude the theory of rationality, is the ultimate game. It's an example that shows how people use the information that is around them to make decision. We can call this bounded rationality as well. So in the ultimate game, a proponent suggests a ratio that would seem fair and be acceptable to the responder, but still leaving the proponent in a better position. Because in this game, the proponent offers, they have to share 100%, a whole, which is 100%, and then the proponent has to propose a ratio. And if the responder refuses that ratio, then they all lose out, they get nothing. So it's in the best interest of the proponent to propose a ratio that is acceptable. And people usually make these decisions not based on rationale, it's just based on their personal interests. And systemic deviations from making rational judgments are due to information processing shortcuts, what you know, and then the time limit that you have, and the limited processing ability of the brain. You have to use the information that you have, that you managed to synthesize, and also more emotional and moral interventions. Would it be fair to share 10 to 90%, or it's better to share 60-40? And then there are also distortions in storing and retrieving memories. Sometimes you think, oh, maybe this person gave me more last time. And then there's also socialization. Are we socialized to give more, or are we socialized to give less? So it depends with where a person is coming from. So this is why rationality, there is no perfect rationality in the world. It is limited to what you know.
Companies develop tactics, processes, and functionalities to overcome the implicit bias that produces discrimination. And one of the strategies at the product design level is where product bundling with diverse benefits can be an option, where companies bundle various rider benefits. For instance, if it's an insurance company, then they will do a bundle product with including riders that, for example, if it is a domestic insurance, they'll have political violence risk covered in, personal accident, and burglary, as well as life insurance. This benefit bundled together, it's easier for customers to, one, get offer that is inclusive packages, ensure they have equitable access, but also it minimizes bias offerings in that scenario. And in the similar scenario is like where TripAdvisor will offer bundle packages where they have recruitment, and this is where we conceal the candidates' details, including that is at the resume level, the name, if there's a photo, and the gender, and any other background information that will influence decision. That it results to conducting blind reviews by clients and also blind hiring bias. So then in this, the other one is on standardized interview and performance processes. At standardized interview, where we have standardized questions, and rubric, where we have questions based on job analysis. It reduces bias and it's time, it saves time. On one end, you can actually digitally record this, and there's fair evaluation. And fair evaluation across where companies have standard evaluation procedures, then fair evaluation also applies because questions are set for evaluating employees' performance.
Artificial being a buzzword, we feel that definitely it is a process that can be used by company where we can automate and standardize decision-making processes like, for example, resume screening, performance evaluation, and identification of biases in job description. So regular audits of these systems are crucial for identifying and rectifying any inherent biases. We can also use advanced algorithm to detect and flag bias reviews and rating of guests on Airbnb properties, helping to identify, mitigate discriminatory patterns based on race, nationality, and personal characteristic in guest feedback. Additionally, we can also implement anonymous rating and commenting by guests can further reduce biases. This is particularly significant in regions like Africa, myself coming from Mauritius, where actually you can see negative comments by malicious international guests, which can lead to biases in selecting Airbnb properties due to race and color. Company on product services. So company can employ non-price competition, advertising strategies such as branding Uber taxis, sponsoring events, and educating or informing buyers about their claim processes. For instance, insurance companies can highlight that their claims process is straightforward and the claims are paid within 48 hours. So as we can see in this video, it's very important to enhance the transparency in diversity and inclusion initiative policies. So we can create and implement policies related to anti-discrimination, flexible work arrangement, and equal opportunities. So these initiatives are aimed at building a more supportive and inclusive environment that can attract diverse talent and promote retention. We also feel that we can also have publish reports on the diversity metrics and progress toward inclusion goals, so that it can hold the company accountable. Not only hold it accountable, but also I would say to demonstrate its commitment to reducing discrimination. As you see in this video, BNB has established a very thorough non-discriminational policy, which address bias among hosts and guests, ensuring that all users feel welcome, regardless of their background.
The other feedback model is applying anonymous feedback mechanism, where companies, either insurance or even Uber or Airbnb, can actually incorporate anonymous feedback model to allow collect insights of cultural practices internally at the human resource level. They have channels, surveys that are done anonymously that allow for the employees to give feedback. And the other one enables then reporting that is non-biased, and then it also enhances the enhanced policy and practices in employment space. Looking at data analysis and bias detection, this is a very interesting where they can leverage on softwares such as employee salary performance, presentations on terms of cultural background, gender inclusion, and seeing this to ensure that they actually enable them to take corrective action using the dashboard mechanisms and software.
So we feel like, it's very important that we develop training guidelines of raising awareness about implicit bias among employees to adopt multicultural ethics and inclusive behavior. The verification through evidence, real-time photos. Again, this is debatable. We were just discussing that we could actually real-time photos whereby Airbnb can integrate evidence, property photos, and commenting by hosted guests. But at the same time, we're also thinking that even these pictures should be, this can be manipulated. However, still, we feel that is one of the functionalities that can be put in place where we can verify experiences and allow owners to offer feedback on action taken. Thank you so much. Over to you, Serge, to do the conclusion of our presentation for today. Thank you.
So in conclusion, all biases are wrong. Implicit and explicit biases significantly influence who is hired, who is promoted, who gets this economic opportunity. So your organization eventually, instead of their ability, then your organization is going to face challenges. Then this becomes easily an economic problem. So organizations, institutions have to put in energy to mitigate or reduce or even abolish these biases by implementing all the strategies we have mentioned upstairs, like anonymous recruitment, standardized evaluation, AI audits, promoting transparency in diversity policies, and providing training on implicit biases in order to fight this bias. This approach will enable this organization to avoid consequences that could occur due to the bias, and in return improve their profitability and income. Thank you.
Thank you, Asante.